You ever find yourself thinking about something long after it should have faded? Like a moment so small, so ordinary at first, but somehow it digs in, stays with you, becomes something you don't know how to shake. That's what happened to me. It started with a window. Just a window across the street. Left open. Lights on. And him, standing there like he didn't care who saw. At first, I didn't think much of it. I looked away. Told myself it was nothing. But the next night, it was open again. And this time, I lingered. I told myself stories. Maybe he was careless. Maybe it was hot. Maybe I was reading into things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew better. He moved like someone who wanted to be seen. Slow. Intentional. And I watched. Every night after dinner, I'd find a reason to be near that window. Wiping the counter that was already clean. Pretending I didn't notice. But I noticed everything. The curve of his shoulders. The way he stretched. The way his eyes sometimes found mine. It made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not since before Lily. Not since before Tom started sleeping with his back turned and barely saying goodnight. I didn't touch anyone. Didn't speak a word. But I knew I was crossing something. And I kept crossing it. Because when someone looks at you like they see you, really see you, it does something. It makes the rest of your life feel quiet. Muted. Like you've been walking around half asleep and didn't realize it until someone opened their eyes and looked right into yours. That window became a ritual. And watching him became a need. Not for love. Not for sex. But for something I didn't have words for. It's been 2 years since I started looking, and I still don't know how to forgive myself for what I felt. For what I almost did. But maybe if I tell this story, someone out there will understand. Maybe you will. Maybe you've been there too. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where the moments we try to bury finally come to light. We moved here thinking it would be a fresh start. New house. New street. New neighbors. New chance to fix what we didn't dare admit was broken. But sometimes, new places don't heal you. They just give your pain a different backdrop. Our house sat right in the middle of a quiet cul-de-sac. It had everything the brochures promised: white fences, clean sidewalks, and friendly nods from strangers you'd never really know. But what I remember most is how close the houses were. So close you could hear the neighbor's blender through the wall. So close. His window faced mine. Tom, my husband, was the one who pushed for the move. He said we needed more space. Said Lily needed a yard to play in. Said we needed a change. But what he didn't say was that we hadn't really spoken in months. Not really. We exchanged words. Schedules. Grocery lists. But the space between us had been growing long before the moving trucks showed up. Tom was the kind of man who did everything right on paper. He worked hard. Paid bills. Kissed Lily goodnight. He smiled when people were watching. But with me, he was somewhere else. Always on his phone. Always tired. Always just stressed. I stopped asking questions. Lily, though, she was everything bright. 9 years old. Always humming. Always drawing. Always asking me why birds fly in AV. She was my heartbeat, my little shadow. She filled the silence with joy I didn't deserve. But even she started noticing how quiet things got between Tom and me. And then there was Daniel. He lived across the street, in a sleek modern home that always looked untouched, like a showroom. I noticed him on the first day, tall, quiet, walking his dog in the evenings. He didn't wave like the other neighbors. Didn't smile much, but there was something about the way he moved. Confident. Still. Like he carried his own silence and didn't owe it to anyone. He lived alone. No ring. No kids. Just him. And those big open windows. I didn't think about him much at first. But that changed. Slowly. And then, all at once. There was something in the way our homes faced each other. Our kitchen windows mirrored perfectly, his just above his sink, mine above mine. At night, when I stood there scrubbing plates and pretending not to feel hollow, I'd glance up. And sometimes, he'd already be looking. Never for long. Never obvious. But it was enough. Enough to feel something stir. I don't know if it was his presence, or the way my absence was growing in my own home. But I started noticing everything. How Tom never touched me unless I initiated. How he stopped asking how I was. How I stopped telling him. And how Daniel, a man I didn't even know, somehow made me feel more real than the man who once promised forever. The walls in our house were thin. But the distance between hearts, that was thicker than ever. And in that space, between routine and resentment, silence and longing, something began to grow. Not a crush. Not even desire, not yet. Just a crack in the surface. A tiny shift. A new awareness. And once it started, I couldn't unsee it, no matter how hard I tried. It started small. One summer evening, I was rinsing out Lily's lunchbox, sun still hanging low in the sky, that golden hour glow slipping through the blinds. And when I looked up, Daniel's window was wide open. Wider than usual. His lights were on, even though the sun hadn't quite set. His shirt was off. He was standing there, wine glass in hand, like he didn't have a care in the world. I stared for a second too long. He wasn't doing anything, just sipping, slow, leaning against the window frame. And then his eyes flicked in my direction. Just for a moment. Quick. Controlled. I looked away, fast. My heart was racing. I told myself it was nothing. Just a man enjoying a warm evening in his own home. But a part of me felt different. Like I'd just been seen. Not caught. Not exposed. Seen. I shook it off. Went back to rinsing plastic containers and trying not to make something out of nothing. But the next night, it happened again. Same time. Same window. Only this time, his lights were dimmed, and the wine glass was already half empty. He wasn't wearing a shirt again. He wasn't looking directly at me. But I could feel it. That tension in the air like a string pulled tight between us, invisible but undeniably real. And again, it was a night Tom was out late. That's what made it worse. Because I noticed the pattern. Every time Tom had to stay late at the office, every time he came home smelling like stale coffee and distant thoughts, Daniel's window would be open. And I would be there, pretending to clean, pretending to be busy, pretending I wasn't waiting for it. The third night, it was different. He was closer to the glass. The lights inside cast shadows across his chest. He wasn't looking at me this time. He was looking down, lost in thought. But I couldn't stop watching him. And I hated myself for it. I'd feel the heat rise in my cheeks, the guilt crawling in, but the longer I stood there, the more the emptiness in my chest started to feel less empty. I told myself it was a coincidence. He couldn't possibly be doing it on purpose. That would be insane. But then came the fourth night. And this time, he looked right at me. Not just glanced. He looked. Long enough that I had to pretend to drop something just to break eye contact. My hands were trembling. My breath got shallow. And yet, somehow, I stayed standing there. And he didn't flinch. Didn't close the blinds. Didn't hide. He just stood there. Still. Steady. Watching. Was it all in my head? Was he just living his life, and I was projecting all this need and longing into the blank space between our windows? Or was he doing it for me? The question lodged itself deep in my chest. I tried to shake it. Tried to focus on Lily's homework. On folding laundry. On anything else. But when night fell, I found myself back at that window. Every single time. And he was always there. Never crossing the line. Never saying a word. Just being visible. Present. Exactly what Tom hadn't been for months. And I didn't want to admit it, but I craved it. That feeling of being seen, being acknowledged, being noticed, even from a distance. I hadn't realized how hungry I was for it. Until Daniel, without touching me, without even speaking, started feeding it. I started rearranging my evening routine without even realizing it. I'd planned dinner so the dishes piled up after Lily was asleep. so that when I stood at the sink, the lights would already be on, so that he could see me, and I could see him. I didn't touch the blinds. Not once. I told myself that closing them would look suspicious, would draw attention. But really, I wanted them open. I never told Tom. Why would I? What would I even say? Hey, honey, I think our neighbor might be flirting with me through the kitchen window while you're buried in your spreadsheets. No, that conversation was never going to happen. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. And I knew what I wasn't doing. I wasn't stopping it. I wasn't pulling back. And every night, my mind turned into a battlefield. One side whispering, it's harmless. It's not like you're cheating. The other side screaming, then why does your heart race every time you see his light come on? I wasn't doing anything. Not really. No words. No touch. But I was waiting. Waiting for the light. Waiting for him to show up. Some nights he didn't. And those were the worst. Because I'd stand there, hands wet with soapy water, staring at a dark window like a fool, feeling disappointment crash through my chest in a way I couldn't explain. Why should I care? Why should I miss him? It made no sense. It was just a game. Just a silly, silent game we weren't even playing out loud. And yet, I started looking forward to it more than anything else in my day. More than Tom's tired kisses. More than Lily's bedtime stories. More than my own reflection. That window became a mirror. And in it, I saw the version of me I had forgotten existed. Desirable. Mysterious. Alive. But with every look I allowed, every second I lingered, came the guilt. The heavy, suffocating guilt. I started snapping at Tom for no reason. Pulling away from his touch. Then hating myself for doing it. He'd ask, everything okay? And I'd smile. Lie. Nod. Because I didn't have the words. I didn't even know what I was doing anymore. I started avoiding my own eyes in the mirror. Because I knew. I knew I was walking a line one I couldn't even see clearly, but felt in every heartbeat. And then, one night, he looked directly at me. No pretending. No pretending to stretch. No accidental glance. Just, straight on. Eyes locked. Still. Calm. Unapologetic. And then, he smiled. Not wide. Just a little curl at the corner of his mouth. Barely there. But it lit a fire in my chest that I didn't know how to put out. My hand slipped into the soapy water. The dish shattered against the sink. I didn't even flinch. Because in that moment, all I could think was, he knows. And worse, I didn't want him to stop. It became a pattern. Same time. Same place. The window. The wine glass. The slow way he moved around his kitchen like he was putting on a show meant only for me. I kept pretending not to notice. Pretending I was too busy scrubbing pans or stacking dishes or wiping the counter I'd already wiped twice. But I was always there. Waiting. Craving. It felt ridiculous, this dance. This invisible string pulling me to the same spot every night. But it also felt like the only thing in my life that made me feel something. And then, one evening, he waved. A simple, casual gesture like neighbors do. But it shattered something in me. Because it wasn't just a wave. It was a line crossed. It was him saying, I see you. I know you see me. Let's stop pretending. My hands froze at the sink. Heart jumped. I gave the smallest nod back. That nod was the moment I stopped lying to myself. I started changing after that. Literally. I'd swap out my loose sweats for fitted leggings. Pull on a low-cut top before heading to the kitchen. Fluff my hair a little. Put on lip balm like it mattered. I told myself I just wanted to feel good. Just wanted to feel human again. But it wasn't for me. It was for him. And the part that scared me the most was how good it felt. I didn't even realize how numb I'd been, how much I'd faded into the role of wife, mother, ghost, until Daniel started watching me back. He noticed things that night. I shut the blinds. For the first time since it all started. The room felt darker than usual, thicker, heavier, like I'd smothered something alive. I felt sick. Not because of him, but because of me. Because I knew exactly what I was doing. Because I liked it. And because I wasn't ready to stop. The next morning, there was something under the doormat. I thought maybe it was a flyer. Or a delivery slip. But no, it was a note. Folded. No envelope. No name. Just 5 words, scribbled in clean, sharp handwriting. You looked beautiful tonight. I couldn't stop watching you either. My hands trembled. My heart pounded so loud I thought the neighbors might hear it. I looked around, like someone might jump out and accuse me on the spot. I could have ripped it. Could have thrown it away. Buried it in the trash before anyone saw. But I didn't. I read it again. And again. And then I kept it. Slipped it inside an old cookbook no one touched. That same night, I left a note on his doorstep. No words. Just my phone number. I didn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Every vibration of my phone made my stomach twist. It wasn't until 2 days later that he replied. A text. No greeting. No name. Just, I wasn't imagining it, was I? That was all it took. A floodgate opened. We started texting late at night. Quiet, hidden conversations while Tom snored next to me. Short messages that turned longer. Light banter that turned deeper. He asked me things Tom hadn't asked in years. How I was feeling. What I dreamed of. What I missed about who I used to be. I found myself telling him everything. Not the facts, but the truth. I told him about the loneliness. The silence in my marriage that had become deafening. The way I didn't even recognize myself anymore. And he listened. Really listened. No judgment. No pressure. Just space. It wasn't physical. We hadn't touched. Hadn't even stood in the same room. But it was more intimate than anything I'd shared with Tom in a very, very long time. And I couldn't stop. I lived for those moments. For the feeling of being chosen. Of being wanted. Not for what I do, but for who I was when someone finally looked. Then one night, he asked me to come over. Just once. Just to talk, he said. I stared at that message for almost an hour. Heart racing. Mind spinning. And the only thing louder than the guilt was how badly I wanted to say yes. I stood in front of Daniel's door that night. Palms sweating. Breath shallow. Knees locked so I wouldn't collapse into the weight of what I was about to do. I didn't knock. But I didn't leave either. I just stood there. Frozen between 2 lives. One I had built over a decade, full of routines, school runs, quiet dinners, and carefully folded laundry. And the other, the one I hadn't even stepped into yet, but already felt like it knew me better. I could hear music playing inside. Soft, slow, something like jazz. He was home. He knew I was out there. He had to. My fingers curled into fists. And still, I couldn't knock. I turned around and walked back across the street like a ghost. Back into my house. Back into my marriage. Back into my skin. But something was different now. Tom noticed it almost immediately. He looked up from his laptop that night and narrowed his eyes. There was a pause. A long one. Then he asked, "Is there something you're not telling me?" I answered too fast. "No, why?" And it hung there, my voice sharp and offensive. Too quick. Too obvious. He didn't press. Just nodded and went back to his screen. But his eyes didn't look at it the same way. They were watching me now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed. Turned. Checked my phone even though I knew I shouldn't. And there it was. A message from Daniel. "Are you okay?" It hit me like a stone to the chest. Because no one had asked me that in so long, not like they meant it. Not in a way that made me want to cry just reading the words. I didn't reply. I didn't know how to. I was spinning. Dizzy with guilt. Heavy with longing. And buried beneath the shame was still this ache for him. The next morning, everything felt louder. Tom's footsteps. Lily's cartoons. The scrape of a chair. Even the birds outside felt like they were screaming. I tried to go about the day like normal. Breakfast. Dishes. Laundry. smile, nod, pretend. But my hands were shaking, and that's when it happened. Tom was looking for a recipe book. He pulled open the drawer where I kept the old cookbooks. And there it was. The note. Folded. Tucked neatly between 2 pages. The one Daniel had written. "You looked beautiful tonight. I couldn't stop watching you either." Tom held it up. Didn't say a word. Just looked at me. And in that moment, my entire world held its breath. I told Tom it was nothing. A prank. A stupid joke from a neighbor with no boundaries. He stared at me. Not angry. Not yelling. Just quiet. And that silence was worse than anything he could have said. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he didn't press either. We slept in silence that night. Not back to back out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. Not love. Not hate. Just hollow. A space between us that used to be filled with laughter, or sighs, or even arguments. Now it was just air. Cold. Still. I lay there, eyes wide open, listening to the sound of his breath, counting the seconds between each inhale like they were a ticking clock on the life we once had. And the truth is, I never stepped foot in Daniel's house. I never crossed that threshold. Never said yes. Never touched him. But in my heart, I did more than that. In my mind, I had opened a door I was never meant to open. And that guilt, it follows me. In the way Tom looks at me now, longer, more careful, like he's trying to read something between my words. In the way I can't look Lily in the eye when she says things like, "Mommy, you look sad lately." In the way I avoid mirrors. Because when I look into my own eyes, I see someone I don't fully recognize. Someone who wanted something so badly, not even passion, not lust, just to be seen, to be felt, to be known. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Not what almost happened, but what it revealed about me. What I was missing. What I had buried for so long under diapers and dinners and pretending. Daniel never reached out again. And I haven't spoken to him since. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass the kitchen, his window is open. Just like before. Light on. Curtains drawn back. Like he's waiting. But I don't look. At least, I try not to. Because even now, after everything, part of me still aches when I see that glow across the street. Part of me still remembers what it felt like to be wanted, even if it was wrong. Even if it was fleeting. Even if it nearly cost me everything. Have you ever found yourself wanting something, not because it was right, not because it made sense, but simply because, for once, it made you feel seen? Noticed. Heard. Like you existed outside of chores and calendars and empty goodnights. Is it still cheating if no one ever touched? If no lips ever met? If no clothes ever came off? If the only thing exchanged was attention and silence, filled with meaning? Or is that worse? Because with physical things, at least you can call it what it is. But this? This was slow. Subtle. It crept in through the cracks I didn't know were there. And now I carry it like a bruise on my soul. I wonder, what would you have done? If you were in my place, if your heart was aching quietly in the background of your own life, if someone, anyone, finally looked up and made you feel like you mattered again, would you have looked away? Would you have shut the blinds sooner? Would you have said yes? Or would you have stood in front of that door too, torn between fantasy and family, shame and longing, guilt and hunger? Please tell me in the comments. Was I wrong or just human? Loudspeaker, if this story stirred something in you, if it made you think or remember or feel something you haven't let yourself feel in a while, like this video, share it. And subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we peel back the layers of the human heart, one true story at a time. Because some stories, you don't just listen to, you live them. You carry them. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Studio microphone narrator. Haunting. Slow tone sometimes. We don't crave touch. We crave acknowledgement. We crave to be noticed, to be seen through the noise, the roles, the years. And that's what Daniel gave me. Not passion. Not promises. Just presence. I don't know if he still thinks of me, or if it ever meant anything to him at all. But I know what I felt, and even if it was wrong, it was real. It reminded me of a version of myself I had buried. A woman I forgot how to be. A longing I had denied for far too long. But be careful with attention. Because sometimes, it looks like a harmless window, an open space in the quiet of your evening. But what it really is a door. And once you walk close enough, once you let the light from that room touch the emptiest corners of you, you may never be able to close it again.